Now, having talked about learning, let us see if there are any myths about learning. Well, since we have made it this far in life and we probably think that we know how we learn, and eventually we also feel that how others learn, but it turns out that there are certain false beliefs about learning as much as about teaching. And these are the problems that we carry with us for a long time till we or someone does not question it. There is a gap between conventional wisdom and fact when it comes to the process of learning. Many experts have maintained that there are many myths about learning. Let us take a look at some of these myths. The first myth, and you might be surprised that to know that this is a myth, that we have set learning styles. You have probably heard about visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning. Like many myths, there is a bit of a truth that lies behind it, but there is no research to support learning styles. One major recent review stated simply that the authors found virtually no evidence for this approach. Well, then how do we go about it? How to really learn? Instead of matching your content to the process, students should learn music by listening to music, while students should learn reading by doing more reading. Now we move to the second myth, which says that rereading material is a good way to learn. I'm sure if you are in a classroom and you are asked to respond to this statement, you would have raised your fingers and nodded your head saying, yes, that's true. People actually tend to see themselves as a computer. Data flowing past them somehow gets into their head. And there's a researcher, Bozer, who says that's not how learning works. You need to make sense of the order to understand. Now, research shows that quizzing yourself is far better way to learn than rereading material. Ask yourself, what is the author trying to say? How is this different than other things I've read? How does this relate to other material I know? And when you are making sense of something, you start learning it. Now that takes us to the next myth. The number of hours you put into something translates to better understanding. And I'm sure many of us actually agree on this, that you need to put in a lot of efforts to have better understanding of something. There was this very interesting fellow called Malcolm Gladwell, and he wrote a book in which he mentioned that 10,000 hours theory provided a benchmark for becoming an expert, but this does not necessarily translate to learning. So the next myth is that you are either right or left-brained. The idea that some people are right-brained while others are left-brained has been around for a while now. According to this theory, left-brained people are more logical, analytical, methodical, whereas right-brained people are more creative and artistic. But let's take a break. In a 2013 study by scientists from the University of Utah analyzed over 1,000 brains and found no evidence that people preferentially use the left or right hemisphere of their brain. Therefore, this myth remains a myth. Then the next myth is something that probably again all of us might agree with, is that we only use 10% of our brain. Now there is this popular theory that we only use 10% to 20% of our brain has been around for quite some time and was even promoted by recent Hollywood movies like Lucy or Limitless, where the protagonists uncover a way to unlock the rest of their brain and end up with superhuman powers. But then, dear educators, believe me that this is a myth and we do not really have such superhuman powers to be unfolded. Let's move to the next myth, which says that there is something called learning pyramid. Although the learning pyramid myth was debunked a long time ago, it still lingers and it takes is taken as fact by many teachers and students. The theory says that people remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, and 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say and write, and 90% of what they do or teach others. Well, now there is no research to support this argument. In fact, all the research that has been conducted shows that there is no such division of percentage of understanding and learning according to the act which is involved in it. Well, now it is the time to pause the video and respond to the following question. Do you think that some or all of these myths mentioned are not acceptable to you? You have to decide yes or no, and you also have to write down one reason to why you think that it is so. After doing so, you can resume the video. Now that you have done this activity, some of you may have felt that some of these are not myths but facts about learning. I suggest that you Google evidences to support your views. This discussion brings us back to the question that we took to answer. What is learning? I'll again present another definition of learning, but I would like you to underline the keywords or phrases in this particular definition. According to Biggs, learning is a way of interacting with the world. As we learn, our conceptions of phenomena change and we see the world differently. The acquisition of information itself does not bring about such a change, but the way we structure that information and think with it does. So education is about conceptual change and not just the acquisition of information. Now, having made an attempt to understand what learning is and what learning is not, let us move to the next aspect associated with learning, namely objectives of learning or learning objectives. You must have noticed that there is a lot that can and does come with the scope of learning. However, when it comes to formal learning, we need to draw lines and set objectives of learning. Having clearly stated learning objectives helps both learners and educators. Hence, it is important that we discuss the notion of learning objectives. So, what is a learning objective? It is a specific, measurable, short-term, observable statement. It indicates desirable knowledge, skills, or attitudes expected of learners or students as a result of instructional activities. It is a framework for evaluating students' understanding and progress. Having said this, we should also know what learning objective is not. Well, it is certainly not a vague, non-measurable statement. Let us now see what are the different types of learning objectives. There are many ways in which these types can be defined, but we will take Bloom's taxonomy to model or define learning objectives. Bloom identifies three domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Now, these three types of learning include creating new knowledge, developing feelings and emotions, and enhancing physical and manual skills. Now, you can apply this understanding of the different types of learning objectives to the kind of programs that we have in various courses and see if the objectives cater to the creating new knowledge or cater to developing feelings and emotions or cater to enhancing physical or manual skills. Now, these three types of learning can be applied to the programs, the courses that we design. You may take a look at the courses that are run at your institute level and see which of these courses cater to the first type of learning objective, that is creating new knowledge. Which courses cater to the second type of objective, that is developing feeling or emotions, and the third, that is enhancing physical manual skills. Most courses which are skill based or which are technology based focus mainly on the manual skills or physical skills. Many courses in humanities and social sciences develop feeling and emotions, whereas many courses in general create new knowledge. Now, these types of learning objectives will help us understand what exactly is expected of a learner. There are certain components of learning objectives. I will present an ABCD model or ABCD method of identifying components of a learning objective. Now, this is based on Robert Meagher's model. What does A mean? A stands for audience, and in this case our audience is our learners. This answers the question, who will be doing this behavior? Who will be doing this particular learning? B stands for behavior, that is performance. It corresponds to the question, what should the learner be able to do? C stands for condition. This answers the question, under what conditions do learners demonstrate their mastery of the objective? And D is degree, which is also called criterion, which answers the question, how well must the learned behavior be done? Now, again it's time to pause the video and respond to the following question. Think of the courses that you have studied or taught and note down at least one example of each type of objective. You may also write down a sentence or two justifying your classification in that type. After doing so, you can resume the video.